Canada, we've got quite a show lined up. Let's kick it off because that's the way we start.
Oh, hello. Do you have a warrant to be here?
Everyone has an opinion about Canadian federal politics.
And racism, including from the guy who spent the first half of his adult life as a practicing racist, dressing up in hideous racist costumes so many times he can't.
The opposition knows that to make an accusation directly at the character of a single person is not appropriate.
Mr. Speaker, the leader opposite is showing us exactly what shameful, spineless leadership looks like. He shakes hands with white nationalists and then goes to actively court the support of those members and has the nerve. Get it together, Greg! Any idea what you're doing?
Order!
IT contracts, even though they admit they do no IT work. $250 million. WTF.
Here, here.
And I say to him, come to my riding, my diverse riding in Durham, and try that on us, where we have Christians and Muslims, Sikhs, Hindus, and Jews living together, all people who believe that mothers and fathers matter.
Just want enough to warm it up some. I don't want to set it on fire. It's very easy to set it on fire.
It's a beautiful day in the neighborhood, and you have a right to defend your house with firearms.
There's no chance, bud.
When I'm Prime Minister, I will keep my promises. Now,
yeah, yeah, it looks like we made it. Look how far we've come, my baby. We might have took the long way. We knew we'd get there someday. They said, I bet they'll never make it. But just look at us holding on. We're still together, still going strong. You're still the one I run to, the one that I belong to. You're still the one I want for life. You're still the one that I love, the only one that I dream of. You're still the one I kiss goodnight. Ain't nothing better. We beat the odds.
And welcome back to Canada Tonight. If you've been seeing red lately, you're not alone. PIERRE has released its latest Rage Index survey. The pollster says that it hit a new high in April with record levels of anger among Canadians. Now, the Rage Index measures Canadians' anger or annoyance toward 6 factors: the federal government, their provincial government, the economy, personal financial situations, certain changes happening in Canada, and the latest stories that are in the news. Dan joins us from Ottawa. Dan, good to talk to you.
I'm happy to be here. I'm not angry today. I'm happy to be talking to you.
Well, I'm thrilled to be talking to you and hearing your voice now. You've been tracking Canadians' rage for almost 2 years. How has the recent round of results differed from what you've seen before?
Well, I mean, we'll cut to the chase. It's a record high on the Rage Index. This is something we've been asking for some time. We ask 6 questions: how you feel about government, how you feel about the economy, stories in the news, and we just average together the percentage of people that are angry about all these things. And in the April edition of the Rage Index, we saw a record number of people that were angry about the economy in Canada, record number of people that were angry about government, both federally and provincially. And I think this probably all ties together. If you're upset about the economy, you're looking for someone to blame, and there's lots of blame going around these days.
So who's the angriest? Where are we going to find the most angry Canadians? What province?
Well, Ontario tops the list, and this was fielded before the Leafs went out of the playoffs too, so maybe even angrier today than they were last week when we were actually doing the survey. But yeah, Ontario actually moving into #1 spot. Alberta has generally been at the top of the list, probably because there's a lot of anger towards the federal government there. But Ontario, we're seeing a lot of economic frustration these days. I think this is driven by things like high housing prices and high grocery prices, which are affecting everybody, but maybe a bit more acute in Ontario than some other places.
I mean, affordability-wise, I'd argue BC, Vancouver feels pretty unaffordable. Why isn't Vancouver a little higher, given the price of things here? And I'm coming to the audience from Vancouver, the price of housing for sure.
Yeah, I mean, ultimately it comes down to how people feel themselves, right? And maybe people are more used to some of these factors there. Maybe things feel like they're changing quicker in Ontario. Maybe they're just in a better mood because, I mean, honestly, like whether or not you're feeling angry or happy could depend on the weather, could depend on many other things. And there is this kind of, stigma people have of being a little more laid back on the West Coast. Maybe there's some truth to that. And maybe there just is a bit less frustration there at this time of the year when it's lovely in Vancouver.
It's fair. It is pretty sunny and nice out here, at least today. Alberta used to be the angriest, but you say Ontario took over. Do you have a sense as to exactly why that would have happened?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to say what the specific cause is. Like I said, it seems like there's a lot more economic frustration bubbling up in Ontario these days. One thing that we did see, speaking of BC, you're asking about here, is a pretty big jump in terms of the level of anger towards the provincial government in BC compared to past waves. This is something that for the past year and a half, anger towards the provincial government's always been at the bottom of the list in BC, and that jumped up 16 points this wave. So, it does seem like there is some growing resentment there that could be problematic given they're heading into an election year for the government there.
Okay, let's try and end this on a positive note if we can. In your conversations with Canadians, do you have a sense as to what they feel good about?
Well, I mean, look, we do ask on all these questions, are you happy or are you angry? And, we just get very few people who say they're happy about government or the economy or things like that. I mean, we did ask about the federal government, about the federal budget on this wave of research. And, people were pretty happy about the actual measures that were in the federal budget. Still pretty angry with the federal government overall. Maybe that hasn't changed things. But, I do think there are things people can look at and say, look, I'm glad someone's doing something on this front when it comes to housing or food programs. So maybe there's still an opportunity there for people to feel those emotions, but they just seem to be happening less often than maybe a couple of years ago.
Dan Arnold, Chief Strategy Officer for PIERRE, with a smile on his face. Thank you.
Happy to be here.
Oh, it's been bothering me for months. Bill C-63 in Canada, Trudeau's so-called Online Harms Act, which is basically a censorship law. It is despised by the people. Nobody wanted it other than people in the professional grievance industry who were delighted about it. But I was disappointed but not surprised to see that the official Jews of Canada have endorsed C-63. I know why. It's a combination of reasons. For one thing, they get massive grants from Justin Trudeau, as do most ethnic groups in this country. So, if you pay a lobby group hundreds of thousands of dollars, odds are they'll support you when you ask for their support. So it's a shame that the Jewish community sold out to Trudeau for a few bucks. A more friendly interpretation would be that Jews are so desperate for relief from the wave of anti-Semitism out there that they'll cotton on anything. And if they look at a law that says we'll ban mean words online, well, why not support it? Well, there's some good reasons why not to support it. And that's on the Canadian side. The United States did something not as dramatic. They didn't bring in a massive censorship law, but what they did do is adopt an official definition of anti-Semitism. I mean, that's useful. What is anti-Semitism? The government has an opinion. Each of us can have an opinion. I know why the American Congress did that, because they're appalled by Hamas. They want to show their solidarity with the Jewish community, but same thing. When the government gets into the hurt feelings business, it's not going to end well. I am sure that the American Congress is well-meaning, and there might even be some people who are well-meaning who support Trudeau's censorship. But I'm pretty sure I know how it's going to be used. Take a look at this video from some nameless Canadian cabinet minister. Really, their identities really aren't important. There's only a handful of Canadian cabinet ministers who make decisions. Take a look at this announcement of what, $250 million. Actually, it's altogether more than $1 billion to crack down on the human emotion called hate. Take a look.
Today's investment of $1.2 million for Building Bridges workshops will further enhance our Team Canada approach to combating hate. By supporting victims and communities by making it easier to report hate crimes, to provide resources and tools for community organizations to support victims of hate, addressing the significant knowledge gap that exists in the Canadian hate crimes landscape, including information on the rights and freedoms guaranteed by the Charter, teaching investigation techniques on how to recognize hate crimes, developing strategies for outreach and engagement with communities who experience hate, and by providing fundamental knowledge to better equip police so that they can understand, so that they can investigate and support prosecutions related to hate crime. These workshops are providing communities across the country with the tools and resources they need to truly meet the moment and fight back against the alarming rise in hate that we're witnessing. We're at a pivotal moment when it comes to addressing hate in our country, and the work is urgently needed now more than ever. And while some so-called leaders are openly and recklessly inciting hate by embracing white nationalists and far-right extremist ideologies, we are doubling down on our commitment to protect Canadians from this intolerance and hate. Because we know at the end of the day, hatred is an extremely serious problem facing Canadians, and it is incumbent upon us as responsible leaders to deliver and invest in a serious response for Canadians.
So there are literally right now hate encampments, hate marches at the University of Toronto, at McGill, at University of British Columbia, at universities across Canada, across America, and in some parts overseas as well. You don't need to spend hundreds of millions of dollars teaching people how to find hate. There's a lot of it out there, but did you catch that phrase she used? That she's going after the far right. Is it the far right that's having hate marches? It is not. It's the woke left in coalition with Islamist extremists, which is surely not what she meant. So what the Liberals are doing is they're taking advantage of people being afraid of hate, hate from Hamas, hate that turns into violence, and saying, yes, let's pass an anti-hate speech law. But they're giving it away. But we're going to go after the right wing, the far right. Of course, they call anyone they don't like far right. They call the truckers the far right. We don't actually need hate speech laws to deal with Hamas riots. We have all the laws we need already.
All right, gang, we're going to drop into question period now because it is kicked off, and I think that's fun. Also, check out our friends at Rebel News. They're pretty fun. Ezra Levant is a stud. Definitely check out Rebel News. Anything I ever show on here, I'm promoting these people. Like Dimebag Coins, who sang that lovely song for us earlier. Check out his channel. It's here in the chat. Anyway, let's get into Question Period Canada. We'll dig that up here. They always do an ad. Before we get into that, I want to say hello to everybody. Like, obviously, hello, Kirk and Sheila. Good afternoon. Mr. Pickles, part of the team. David Armstrong, welcome to the group. I think I saw Donna go through here. I saw Patty, obviously. Hey, Patty, what's up? Kenzie, good to see you. I do like the people that come back. It's very nice to see you every day. Johnny Friendly, what's up, sir? Gordon, good day. How are you? James Metcher, what's up? There's so many. Mamba T, like someone. It's good to see you. Maximus, always. It's a pleasure to see you in the room. Who else? There's so many people, guys. I'm trying to flip through, like, who we saw in the room. 2 flips, obviously, every day, every time you're here. It's amazing. Hope you like the videos. Janet Nunn is probably not in the room yet, but I'd like to give a shout out to Janet. I'd like to give a shout out to Brent as well. He's working today, so can't catch today's episode. Janice, good day. How are you? It's good to see you here all the time. Anyways, we're jumping back into question period, and we're going to see how that goes. If I missed anybody, Owlette, almost missed you. Everybody, I don't want to miss anyone anytime, but sometimes you'll miss a person. It's never on purpose. Like, we're trying to include everybody as we watch our daily soap opera. Let's get into it. Here's our soap.
Annual Science Meets Parliament event. And invited by the Canadian Science Policy Centre, these leaders from the world of science and innovation have come to forge stronger ties with policymakers. It is clear that a mutual understanding of each other's realities will lead to more collaboration, and that is crucial because science must be at the heart of all the policies we debate in this House. Today, I had the opportunity to discuss French language science and rural research funding with Simon Girard, a professor at the Université du Québec à Chicoutimi and Canada Research Chair for Genetics and Genealogy. On behalf of the Bloc Québécois, I would like to thank delegates. Parliament is their home, and the door of the Bloc Québécois will always be open.
The honourable member from Brantford Brant. After 9 years, this Prime Minister is not worth the crime, chaos, drugs, and disorder. This Prime Minister must put a full stop to the legalization of hard drugs like fentanyl, meth, and crack to other cities like Toronto after the failures in British Columbia. The Liberals can accuse us of politicizing, but they're the ones treating Canadians' lives as pawns in their wacko drug experiment.
That's right.
The most vulnerable Canadians deserve hope and treatment, not more taxpayer-funded hard drugs. Canadians have 2 choices. They can side with Conservatives in the fight to ban hard drugs and offer recovery for those battling addiction, or legalize smoking meth and fentanyl in parks around kids with this wacko NDP Liberal government. Only common sense Conservatives will end this wacko and deadly experiment. Let's bring our loved ones home.
Order.
The Honourable Member Alfred Pellon. Mr. Speaker, today I pay tribute to an exceptional group of young athletes from Laval who brought home the gold medal at the Copa Surf New England Tournament 2024 on March 10th. Congratulations, Alessio, Alexandra, Alexis, Ahmed, Adriano, Damien, Johnny, Gilas, Jacob, Giuliano, Ken, Kevin, Kwasu, London, Lucas, Mohammed, and Nicholas. Led by their coaches, Michael and Santino de Seta and Anita Rinaldi, These young people demonstrated that hard work and teamwork are the keys to success. Their commitment and discipline are life lessons that will prepare them to become the leaders of tomorrow. Congratulations to the AS Laval U11 team for this remarkable victory. You have done Laval proud, and you are the very image of the values that we hold dear. Congratulations again for this incredible victory. Thank you.
Oral questions, questions orales.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Le Conseil municipal.
Let's get going, guys.
The Mayor and City Council of Montreal have requested legalization of hard drugs in their communities. Will the Prime Minister openly acknowledge the deadly mistake that legalizing hard drugs was in BC, or is he going to try to repeat this problem in Montreal? The Honourable Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, BC requested a pilot project and we worked with them. We agreed to amend the deal with them to better meet their needs. And we will always be there to work respectfully and with respect for science with our partners. But we weren't going to go ahead with any project without the support of the provinces involved. And the Leader of the Opposition knows that full well. But he keeps on his ideological path, like Stephen Harper, even though that was rejected as immoral and obsolete. The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Does the Prime Minister believe in the decriminalization of crack in children's parks, meth smoking in hospitals, or other hard drugs on public transit? Yes or no?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Speaker, we believe in working with British Columbia and with any province that wants us to work with them on this, which is why we accepted their request to modify their pilot project on exactly those issues. This is something we will continue to do, to work in a basis of science around compassion and a medical approach, a health approach, not a criminal justice approach to dealing with the toxic drug supply and addictions. At the same time, Mr. Speaker, we won't be taking lessons from the Conservatives that continue to chase after a Harper-era policy that their own advisors said was obsolete.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
It's an important question, Mr. Speaker, because we need to know what he's going to do next. I just gave him a chance to indicate whether he believes people should be allowed to smoke crack in children's soccer fields or meth in the faces of nurses in hospital rooms. He refused to answer, which begs the question of whether or not he will try to impose the same
the Leader of the Opposition will continue to try and use tragedies and ongoing challenges Canadians and vulnerable people are facing to try and score political points. It's the same reason he's said that he will suspend people's fundamental rights and freedoms to score cheap political points. That is not something that Canadians want to see, Mr. Speaker.
Hear, hear. L'honorable chef de l'opposition.
Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister legalized the use of hard drugs like meth, crack, and heroin in children's parks and in hospitals, and he won't rule out doing it again. This is not an academic question. The City of Toronto submitted a 153-page application, and I quote, seeking an exemption under Section 56.1 of the Controlled Drugs and Substances Act that would decriminalize personal possession of illicit substances within Toronto's boundaries. The Prime Minister's government has been working secretly with Toronto on that plan ever since. Will he, yes or no, rule out decriminalization in Canada's biggest city?
Here, here. The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, once again, we see the Leader of the Opposition trying to score cheap political points on the backs of vulnerable people to promote an ideology that does not work. Mr. Speaker, we will continue to be there with a thoughtful, compassionate-based public health approach on the toxic drug supply, and that means working with jurisdictions. When Vancouver asked us for an exemption, we said no. We would only work with the province, and that's what we did to work with BC. The same thing when it comes to Ontario or Quebec, we will only work with the provinces to ensure any projects they have go.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
So he refuses to rule out repeating this disastrous experiment that killed 2,500 British Columbians. It's because he strongly supports decriminalization, and if he got a chance, he would do it all over again in Toronto, in Montreal, and anywhere else. Mr. Speaker, the final question, therefore, is even the radical NDP government in BC asked for him to reverse his decriminalization. Why did it take him 10 days and 66 more deaths to do it?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Once again, Mr. Speaker, we see the extent to which the Leader of the Opposition will make political attacks on the backs of the most vulnerable people in this country.
Right.
We actually only received the completed request from British Columbia Friday last week and approved it the following Monday, 3 days later, Mr. Speaker. We will always respond quickly in a science-based way when people's lives are on the line. The Leader of the Opposition is continuing to spread falsehoods, Mr. Speaker, instead of actually following the facts and caring for Canadians.
Hear, hear.
The Honourable Member for Belleuil-Chambly. Mr. Speaker, the Liberals have a hard time believing their own commitment to the French language. It's in their culture, but the Prime Minister is responsible for allowing his members to play such dangerous games with our national language. Will the Prime Minister at least request the member that the member step down from the Association of the Francophonie? The Right Honourable Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, defending both of our official languages is a fundamental pillar of the Liberal Party of Canada's policy. And we were the first to recognize that the federal government also has a specific responsibility for protecting French, even within Quebec. We will always be there to defend the French language and to defend language minorities all across the country. I understand that the Bloc keeps trying to pick fights. Sometimes they manage to pick one, but we are going to continue to fight every day for official language minorities. The Honourable Member for Belleuil-Chambly. The Prime Minister is really unaware of the political cost of his last answer. The member who's the chair of the Francophonie Association should step down and has refused to apologize for what he said. Is, in his opinion, those defending French are extremists, and it shows extreme contempt. Will the Prime Minister call on the member in question to step down from his position? The member for Glengarry Prescott Russell should step down. The Right Honourable Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, Canada is a proud partner in the Francophonie, and we show that. Unlike the Bloc, we stand for protecting French all across the country. We're not just isolating Quebec. We're recognizing that the French language needs support and protection all across the country. And yes, sometimes we might get a little excited about it, but we're not trying to pick fights. We're always there to defend minority communities, and we will show leadership all across the world as a proud member of the Francophonie. The Honourable Member for New Westminster Burnaby. The Liberals hold things up and the Conservatives block them. Everything's more expensive for people. Thanks to the NDP, free diabetes drugs will help lower costs for millions of people all across the country. It's shameful that the Conservative leader would take that all away from people. The Conservatives want more money in the pockets of Big Pharma and less in the pockets of Canadians. Will the government work with us to defeat this cruel Conservative attempt to block free diabetes drugs? The Right Honourable Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, we're very pleased to work with whomever in the House to ensure Canadians no longer have to choose between groceries and medications. Yes, we're moving ahead with free diabetes drugs, but perhaps today we learned why the Conservatives are so fiercely opposed, and that's because their anti-choice leader is allowing anti-choice members to vote against contraceptives and the morning after pill. We need to continue to fight hard against that agenda.
The honourable member from Winnipeg Centre.
Mr. Speaker, Canadians will not have free diabetes and birth control if it was up to the Conservative leader. And the Liberals, they keep delaying protecting women's rights. Reproductive rights are human rights, which includes barrier-free access to birth control. Unfortunately, this Conservative leader once again is attacking reproductive rights by blocking access to free contraception. Will the Liberals help us stop the Conservative leader and his anti-choice agenda and their efforts to deny free birth control?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, we are happy to work with everyone in this House to stand against the Leader of the Opposition's anti-choice position and his anti-choice party. We saw yet again today one of his anti-choice members putting forward an anti-abortion narrative. The reality is, Mr. Speaker, we are delivering prescription contraceptives for Canadians right across the country. We'll deliver diabetes medication for Canadians right across the country for free. We're happy to work with the NDP and anyone in this House who wants to stand up for Canadians and for women's rights unequivocally.
The honourable member from Thornhill.
If you're under 30 in Canada, it's nothing but doom and gloom according to Bloomberg Nanos. Gen Z's confidence in their pocketbooks is at the same level that it was in the first months of the pandemic. That's a 16-year low. The budget they said was about generational fairness has turned out to be a monumental failure. Instead, young Canadians keep getting higher spending, higher inflation, and higher interest rates, and they get nothing for it. The Prime Minister was voted in by young Canadians. Why won't he admit that he's destroyed their futures, step aside, and let Conservatives fix everything he broke?
The Honourable Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Finance.
Mr. Speaker, our budget is about generational fairness and investing in young Canadians, investing in the housing, in the affordability and the economic growth that they urgently need. But you know what else young Canadians need, especially young Canadian women? That is control over their bodies. You get that control with free prescription contraceptives. The Conservatives are voting against our budget because they don't believe that a young woman should control her life and her body. We won't let them do that.
I'm certain all members would like to hear the question from the member of Thornhill without interruption and also hear the answers. I'll ask all members to please do so. The honourable member from Thornhill.
So cherry-picking data, misinformation, and lecturing Canadians, telling them that they are wrong. That is a choice, Mr. Speaker. Millennials are telling this government that they can't pay their rent, that they can't pay for groceries, that they can't get to work. Even the bank governor confirmed that $61 billion in new spending is, quote, not helpful when it comes to bringing down inflation and interest rates. When will the Deputy Prime Minister stop her inflationary spending so that young people stand a chance in this country?
The Honourable Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Finance.
I notice, Mr. Speaker, that the Deputy Leader of the Conservative Party did not clarify her own position on a woman's right to choose. Canadian women deserve to know. And you know what? They can't trust any of these Conservatives to actually tell the truth. Because the Governor of the Bank of Canada, in fact, said our budget was helpful because we stuck to our fiscal guardrails. That is what he said, Mr. Speaker, despite Conservative attempts to portray it otherwise.
The Honourable Member from Charleswood, St. James, Assiniboia, Headingley.
After 9 years of this NDP Liberal government, interest on our national debt is more than we spend on health care. The Prime Minister is spending more money lining the pockets of wealthy bankers and bondholders than making sure Canadians get the health care they need. On Thursday, the bank governor told the Finance Committee that government spending was not helpful in bringing down inflation and interest rates. When will the Prime Minister finally start listening, get spending under control to bring down inflation and interest rates?
Hear, hear. The Honourable Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Finance.
Mr. Speaker, yet again, just basic disinformation from the Conservatives. What the Governor of the Bank of Canada said to the Finance Committee last week, and I quote, speaking about our budget, I don't expect it is going to have a significant macro impact relative to our previous fiscal forecast. He said that meeting the fiscal guardrails is helpful. And Mr. Speaker, Moody's has reaffirmed our AAA rating. These are not partisans. Our budget is fiscally responsible. They're simply not telling the truth.
The Honourable Member from Charleswood, St. James, Assiniboia, Headingley.
The Prime Minister is just not worth the cost of housing. On Thursday, the bank governor also told the Finance Committee that housing will continue to be unaffordable into the future. Shame. After 9 years, the Prime Minister has destroyed the dream of home ownership in this country. Sure, they talk a big game, spending billions, but the results are double trouble. Housing prices, double. Mortgage payments, double. Rents, double. Can't they just get out of the way before things double again?
Yeah. The Honourable Minister for Housing, Infrastructure and Communities.
Mr. Speaker, it's difficult to accept criticisms from the Conservative Party when it comes to housing when both their record and their plan demonstrate they have no interest in solving the housing crisis. They're now campaigning on a commitment to cut funding for the programs that actually support home construction. They're campaigning on a commitment to raise taxes on new apartment construction that's going to help make sure apartments are available at prices that people can actually afford. And if you look at the record of the Conservative leader while he had the responsibility for the housing portfolio, he got a total of 6 affordable housing units built across the entire country.
Here, here. Then I have the
Honourable Member for Bellechasse-les-Etchemins-Lévis. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. After 9 years of this Liberal government, Canadians just can't cope. The Governor of the Bank of Canada says this Prime Minister's reckless spending is making it hard to lower interest rates. Canadians are struggling to feed and house themselves, and the Bloc keeps encouraging the Prime Minister to waste their money. When will this Bloc-backed Prime Minister stop impoverishing Canadians with his inflationary policies and devastating spending? The Honourable Minister of Public Services. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm very happy to hear my colleague from Lévis talking about housing. The good news is, or the right answer is, that the Conservatives built a total of 6 housing units during their entire term all across the country. The good news is, thanks to our work, is that there are 205 affordable units that have been built in her riding in recent months. That's great news for the member, but not so good for the Conservative leader as former housing minister. The Honourable Member for Bellechasse-les-Etchemins-Lévis. It's disappointing to see how out of touch they are. Quebecers are faced with humiliating choices: food or housing, toilet paper or toothpaste, soap or deodorant. Mr. Speaker, this is 2024. In a country like Canada, Quebecers and Canadians deserve better. The Bloc and the Prime Minister are not worth the cost. Can they show a little humanity toward Quebecers and stop forcing hunger, homelessness, and poverty on them? They're laughing on the other side, Mr. Speaker. It's shameful. The Honourable Minister of Fisheries and Oceans. Mr. Speaker, it's incredible to hear my colleague on the other side who can't even support our budget. It's not complicated. Their approach is cut, cut, cut. Cut to dental care. Cut to help for families and children. Cuts to seniors. Chop, 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 Mr. Speaker. That's all they know how to do. The Honourable Member for La Pointe de l'Île. Mr. Speaker, they just can't help themselves. Yesterday in committee, the Liberals showed what they really think about protecting the French language. According to the Liberals, people who are concerned about the Anglicization of Montreal are extremists who deserve crude insults that don't need repeating here. That's how the Liberals treated witnesses yesterday who were talking about the future of French. Is that the government's official position, or was the member just saying out loud what many Liberals are secretly thinking? The Honourable Minister of Employment. Mr. Speaker, as my colleague knows full well, French is in decline all across Canada, including in Quebec. This is an issue we take very seriously. Our government was the first federal government to recognize the decline of French all across Canada. Mr. Speaker, as a proud Franco-Albertan, we are there to promote French all across the country and in Quebec, period. The Honourable Member for La Pointe de l'Île. Yesterday's insults send quite a message to Quebecers. To the Liberals, if you're concerned about the future of French in Quebec, you're an extremist and you deserve to be insulted. But yesterday's discussion was actually about data from StatsCan. They're not extremists, but their numbers are extremely worrying for the future of our national language. So the people who care about French in Quebec are full of just one thing, actually: common sense. What's the Liberals' problem with the future of French in Quebec? The Honourable Minister of Foreign Affairs. Mr. Speaker. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. They should stop tearing up their shirts about the future of French, because the Liberal country has been clear for a long time about that. We will stand to protect French in Quebec and all across the country. And not only as a government here in Canada, unlike what the Conservatives might say, we're also doing it internationally. And we have a Canadian in charge of the Association of the Francophonie, and we're very proud of the member of Glengarry for Glengarry Prescott Russell. We're very proud of his work. Order. Order, please. The Honourable Member for La Pointe de l'Île. This isn't the first time the Liberals have gone off script. Remember the member for Saint Laurent who claimed Bill 96 would prevent Anglophones from getting health care in Quebec, or the members from the West Island who threatened to vote against their own official languages reform if it gave French more protection in Quebec, or the Liberals' pride in all their unilingual English appointments. The same Liberals who appointed a Governor General who still doesn't speak French. Why are the Liberals so hostile toward protecting French? The Honourable Minister of Transport. Mr. Speaker, I'm not sure what is the problem with the member opposite, but our colleague is a proud defender of French, not just in Quebec, but all across Canada, whereas the Bloc couldn't give a hoot about that. We have financed the protection of French to the highest level of any government, and the Bloc has consistently voted against it. They're voting against what we're doing, whereas we have our benches standing up for French all across Canada. The honourable member for Lévis-Lotbinière. Mr. Speaker, after 9 years, the Prime Minister and the Bloc aren't worth it. The more the government spends, backed by the Bloc, the more Quebecers struggle. The housing crisis will soon force Canadians to live, through no fault of their own, in their minivans, as a last resort, not as their retirement dream. Mr. Speaker, when will this Prime Minister, backed by the Bloc, with $500 billion in budget appropriations, when will they stop wasting money so Quebecers can once again live with dignity under the roof of a house, not of their minivans? Once again, I'd like to encourage all members to remain silent when a member is asking a question, and obviously when the answer is given. The Honourable Minister of Innovation. Mr. Speaker, Canadians will not be lectured by the Conservatives and their support for extremist groups in Canada. Canadians know they're a party with no vision, no ambition, and no plan either for this country. Here on this side of the House, we know that we need to help families, we need to invest in housing, but you know what? People are seeing that members opposite have voted against support for children, for housing, and for investments in Quebec. It's shameful. Here on this side, we will always fight to improve Canadians' quality of living. The honourable member for Lévis-Lotbinière. Mr. Speaker, the Liberal government hasn't built any housing. They've just built more bureaucracy. With $500 billion in centralizing and inflationary spending that created this cost of living crisis and the housing crisis we're currently in, Mr. Speaker, with thousands of Canadians in dire straits, will the Prime Minister see to it that housing is built quickly? When you're at the point where you're sleeping in your van or your car, it's because this Prime Minister is asleep on the job! The Honourable Minister of National Revenue. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. While my colleague practices his performance for Infoman, we are doing what needs doing. With the fund to help young people save up for their first down payment, 650,000 young people have signed up for that, and they have saved $2.6 billion that way. The Honourable Member for Beauce. Mr. Speaker, after 9 years of this government, Canada's housing crisis has only gotten worse. The dream of buying a home is dead for an entire generation. Proof that the Bloc and this Prime Minister aren't worth the cost. In Beauce, families lucky enough to have affordable housing still have to go to food banks to feed themselves, a 20% increase in use since the start of 2024. When will this Bloc-backed Prime Minister stop wasting money so Quebecers can find decent housing and food? The Honourable Minister of Public Services and Procurement. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. 6 units of affordable housing were built under the Conservative leader's tenure as Minister of Housing. But I'm glad they asked that question because he's a former mayor of a municipality in Quebec, and the Conservative leader has basically called all Quebec municipalities incompetent.
The honourable member for Beauce. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Well, my colleague across the way should come visit Beauce this weekend and explain that to our people. Now, the more this government spends, the more Quebecers are suffering. We're talking about $500 billion in centralizing and inflationary spending that is exacerbating the housing crisis. While Quebecers are trying to survive, the Bloc Québécois has chosen to vote in favour of $500 billion in Liberal budget appropriations. That means they're voting for bureaucracy and for waste. When will this government get out of the way so that Conservatives can fix the budget and build the homes? The Honourable Minister of Housing, Infrastructure and Communities. Mr. Speaker, the Conservative Party are using vulnerable Canadians for their own political purposes. That's not acceptable. Mr. Speaker, through our national housing strategy, we are creating over 150,000 more units of affordable housing. Now, just for comparison, Mr. Speaker, 6 units of affordable housing were built from coast to coast when the Leader of the Opposition was Minister of Housing. That was unacceptable. We are investing in building affordable housing in Quebec and elsewhere in Canada. Once again, I ask the member for Portneuf-Jacques-Cartier and the member for Mégantic-L'Érable to please wait to be recognized by the chair before speaking.
Vancouver East. During the inquiry, concerns around the participation of busloads of Chinese foreign students and falsified documents for the Don Valley North nomination came to light. The commissioner noted that Chinese foreign interference activities could have made a difference on who was nominated in Don Valley North. The Chinese media reported that the nomination was won by 14 votes. The Prime Minister cannot continue to pretend there is nothing to see here. Based on the damning findings, what action will the Prime Minister take now?
The Honourable Minister for Public Safety.
Mr. Speaker, I thank our colleague for the question, and far from not taking this matter seriously, our government has done the exact opposite. Our colleague knows well we have put in place a series of measures now over a number of years to deal with the very real threat that she identified of the Chinese government seeking to interfere in the democratic process in Canada. All political parties, and not just at the federal level, Mr. Speaker, face this threat. That's why yesterday, for example, we introduced important legislation in this House, and we look forward to working with colleagues to hopefully pass it quickly.
The Honourable Member from Nunavut.
People in Nunavut pay hundreds of more dollars in shipping fees than the rest of Canada. Amazon charged a Pangnaptuk resident over $700 in shipping fees. This is unacceptable. The Liberals are catering to ultra-rich corporations by allowing this. Nunavut needs a government that fights to take on Amazon's corporate greed. Why is this government okay with Nunavut paying hundreds more in shipping fees to go to basic goods?
Hear, hear. The Honourable Minister for Northern Affairs.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I thank the member for a very important question. We realize that the price of food is too expensive in Nunavut. That's why we've invested close to $150 million in the Nutrition North program, including $124 million for the Harvester Support Grant, $15 million for the community foods programs. We have $1 billion for the school foods programs, which will benefit Northerners in Nunavut. We are committed to working with the member and with the Nunavut government to make sure we make progress on this very important issue.
L'honorable député de Saint-Laurent.
The Honourable Member for Saint-Laurent.
Made his position clear. If he is Prime Minister, he will pick and choose which rights and freedoms Canadians can have. That's a slippery slope, Mr. Speaker. With the overturning of Roe v. Wade in the United States, est-ce que les femmes canadiennes doivent s'inquiéter de savoir?
Do Canadian women need to be worried about whether they'll be deprived of their right to choose? Can the Minister remind this House of our commitment to defending women's rights?
The Honourable Minister for Women and Gender Equality.
Merci pour la question.
Thank you for the question.
Is unwavering, Mr. Speaker. We will always vigorously support a woman's right to choose her right to have autonomy over her own body. Conservatives say they will use any tools necessary when it comes to a matter of criminal justice. It wasn't long ago that abortion itself was a crime. We will not go back, Mr. Speaker, even though just this morning a Conservative MP reminded us the future they want for women in this country. On this side of the House, a woman's right to choose will never be up for debate.
The honourable member from Kamloops, Thompson, Caribou.
After 9 years, this NDP Liberal Prime Minister is not worth the crime, chaos, cost, or disorder. 66 people died on average while we waited for this Prime Minister to make a decision on BC's request. The government dithered and people died. The government didn't even go as far as it could have in getting rid of its aggressive, radical, and wacko legalization of hard drugs. Why did it take this government so long to reverse its course on legalization, and will it promise never to do it again?
The Honourable Government House Leader.
Well, of course, Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister dealt with that thoroughly earlier in this question period, and we've amended our arrangement with British Columbia. But that member needs to answer a very important question. The Leader of the Opposition has now vowed to have an a la carte Charter of Rights, where today he will decide what rights to have and what rights to not have. What will it be tomorrow, Mr. Speaker? Will it be women's reproductive rights? Will it be the right to a fair trial? Will it be the right to freedom of expression? The notwithstanding charter-ripping policies of this Conservative Party need an answer.
The honourable member from Pitt Meadows, Maple Ridge.
After 9 years, this Liberal NDP Prime Minister is not worth the crime, chaos, drugs, and disorder. Across British Columbia, there's people strung out on drugs, often comatose or dying. The legalization of fentanyl, meth, and crack has led to a tragic wave of death. The Liberals and NDP are panicking as their poll numbers drop. The public is fed up. Deadly hard drugs will still be able to use with today's announcement. When will this Prime Minister stop tinkering and completely end his wacko drug experiment?
The Honourable Minister for Mental... The Honourable President of the Treasury Board.
I thank the honourable member for the question, but I must remind him that that question was already answered. And on this side of the House, what we want to emphasize is that a woman's right to choose and charter rights generally are non-negotiable. On this side of the House, we will always protect the Charter of Rights and Freedoms. We will always stand up for a woman's right to choose, and we ask everybody in this House to vote in favor of contraception for women so they have autonomy over their own bodies. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member from Kelowna Lake Country.
Mr. Speaker, after 9 years, this NDP Liberal Prime Minister is not worth the crime, chaos, drugs, and disorder. The Liberal Minister responsible for the legislation of hard drugs like fentanyl, meth, and crack in British Columbia is still clinging to parts of the Liberals' wacko hard drug legislation experiment. Public open drug use is rampant in our streets. People are even afraid to take their dogs out to walk around their own neighbourhoods. On what day will the Prime Minister completely end this failed radical drug policy?
The Honourable Minister for Mental Health and Addictions.
Mr. Speaker, let me be clear. Today we said yes to BC's request for an amendment to their pilot project. The pilot program that BC asked the federal government to work with them with compassion, conviction, science, and health expertise, Mr. Speaker. BC knows perfectly well, as the advocates and families who are part of this project, that we need to have a public health and public safety approach to this to save lives.
The honourable member from Kelowna Lake Country.
Well, Mr. Speaker, that minister is still supporting hard drug legalization, and here's how it's playing out in our communities. A resident from my community just told me about an incident she witnessed at a local clothing store where a man threatened the two ladies working there, screaming, stomping, and overturning displays. I was on the phone the other day with another resident who works at a street front office, and I could barely hear her due to the screaming just outside her window. And yet this minister clings to parts of her wacko legalization policy of fentanyl, meth, and crack. Again, on what day will the Prime Minister completely end this failed drug policy experiment?
The Before we continue with the answer from the government House Leader, I'm going to ask the honourable member from New Westminster Burnaby please to not comment while members are asking the question. He doesn't have the floor at this time. The honourable government House Leader.
Speaker, of course the Minister and the Prime Minister have dealt with that question, but what is important is to review the past couple of weeks, a very disturbing trend in this country, Mr. Speaker, where the Leader of the Opposition has refused to disavow, to say it's unwelcome to have the support of white supremacists. Then he goes and winks and says, I will make the laws and I will decide what rights exist in this country. What rights is he going to take away? What rights does he intend to take away? Is it women's reproductive rights? Is it the right to freedom of expression? Stand up and tell us what rights you take away.
Colleagues, the amount of time that the Speaker has to spend getting up to asking members to don't have the floor to please not take the floor is almost equivalent to a question. I would like members, please, to make sure that we could have our question period move along quickly, that members please refrain from speaking when the members are asking questions, and that members refrain from speaking when a member is answering questions. L'honorable député.
The honourable member for Drummond. Mr. Speaker, when CBC Radio-Canada CEO Catherine Tate decided to cut 600 jobs in the fall, she wanted to cut as many on the French side as on the English side without taking into account their respective performance or number of employees. Now, she's talking about combining the programming and management of CBC and Radio-Canada because she wants to use Radio-Canada as a shield against possible Conservative cuts at CBC. Always in the best interest of CBC, never in the best interest of Radio-Canada. Is the Minister also ready to sacrifice Radio-Canada's independence in order to preserve the CBC? The Honourable Minister of Canadian Heritage. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I will repeat what I've been repeating since we started talking about this matter. French language programming and content will never be twinned with CBC. Radio-Canada will remain independent and distinct. That is important for francophones in Quebec and everywhere in Canada. On this side of the House, we will defend our public broadcaster in Quebec and everywhere else in Canada. Our public broadcaster is so important, especially in these times when media institutions are making cuts. CBC and Radio-Canada are both essential in Canada, Mr. Speaker. The Honourable Member for Drummond. Mr. Speaker, the only thing that poses a threat to Radio-Canada imminently is not the election of the Conservatives, it's the CEO of CBC Radio-Canada, Catherine Tate, appointed and extended by the Liberals. She's prepared to sacrifice the independence of the French language network as a safeguard against a future government. When we warn that this is a slippery slope and that we need to protect Radio-Canada's independence, the Minister tells us that we're going after the CBC, just like the Conservatives do. That's nonsense. So whose side is the Minister on? Catherine Tate's or Radio-Canada's? The Honourable Minister of Canadian Heritage. Mr. Speaker, I do not understand why my Bloc colleague is picking a fight about a topic that we all agree on in this House. All parties in this House agree, except the Conservatives. Everyone in this House, except for the Conservatives, defends a strong Radio-Canada with a strong financial situation. We also all depend a strong CBC throughout the country with a strong financial situation. We're going to continue to work towards that. Meanwhile, the Conservatives are promising to destroy our public broadcaster and prevent Canadians from having access to information and to quality Canadian content. It's despicable, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member. À l'ordre, s'il vous plaît.
Order, please.
The Honourable Member from South Surrey, White Rock.
After 9 years, does the Prime Minister care that 42,000 Canadians have died from drug overdose? Taxpayer-funded supply of hard drugs has destroyed lives. Addiction workers confirm that most users of so-called safe supply are diverting these drugs into the hands of organized crime. Criminals are selling these drugs to children. Overdose is the #1 cause of death in 10 to 17-year-olds in BC. When will this Prime Minister end this dangerous drug trafficking experiment that profits Big Pharma and kills children?
The Honourable Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Finance.
Mr.
Mr. Speaker, that question has been asked and answered. But I'll tell you what hasn't been answered, Mr. Speaker, that deeply concerns Canadians. It is that over the past few weeks, we have seen the leader of the Conservative Party openly associate with white supremacists and refuse multiple opportunities to disavow their views. Then we saw him advocate an a la carte charter of rights and say he would pick which rights people have. And today we learned one right they do not support, a woman's right to choose. This is deeply concerning, Mr. Speaker. Canadians have a right to know.
Hear, hear.
Although the members were relatively restrained, it's difficult for the Speaker to hear the answer if there are discussions going on, if people would like me to be very mindful of terms of what the question is saying. The honourable member from South Surrey, White Rock.
Thank you. Well, Canadians have the right to know when the RCMP are sounding the alarm why organized crime is getting their hands on these so-called safe supply drugs and diverting them. Thousands of these big pharma government pills have been seized. Organized crime is profiting from selling taxpayer-funded drugs to children. And no, this has not been answered yet today. But the NDP Liberal government is refusing to release the contracts that distribute these drugs. Canadians deserve to know how and why their money's being used. When will the Prime Minister release the big pharma contracts? Just the date, please.
The Honourable Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Finance.
Mr. Speaker, that question has been asked and answered. But I'll tell you what the Conservatives really don't want to answer. They don't want to answer why their leader openly flirts with white supremacists and refuses several opportunities to disavow them. They don't want to answer why their leader openly talks about an a la carte charter of rights. And today was the big reveal, Mr. Speaker, that one of the rights they're going to take away is a woman's right to choose. But we will not let them.
L'honorable député de Charlebourg-Haute.
The honourable member for Charlebourg-Haute-Saint-Charles. Mr. Speaker, hard drug use has become commonplace in the Montreal metro. There's assault, drug use, and homelessness, and it's a scourge in the metro. Riders feel unsafe. It's as if everything that's happening on the surface, the housing crisis, inflation, the opioid crisis, mental health problems, is causing repercussions in Montreal's underground. Can the Prime Minister guarantee that he will ignore the Bloc's calls and not decriminalise hard drugs in Quebec?
The
Honourable Minister of Global Affairs. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, colleagues have asked this question countless times, and it's been answered countless times. The Leader of the Opposition won his leadership race by ensuring that he had the votes of Maxime Bernier supporters and extreme right supporters, as well as those who are against abortion. Those people voted for him. Now he refuses to condemn white supremacists and their ideas. He is here, and one of his members is in fact making anti-abortion statements right here on the floor of this place.
The honourable member from Brampton South.
Mr. Speaker, this is a mental health week, and in a rapidly changing world, strong mental supports for youth is essential. By working with my youth council and stakeholders, I know mental health challenges faced by young people. There are many organizations doing incredible work to make sure youth do not fall through the cracks. Can the Minister of Mental and Addiction tell us what we are doing to support community organizations across the country in delivering more mental health care options for youth?
Good question.
The Honourable Minister for Mental Health and Addictions.
I want to thank the honourable member for her question. Yes, Mr. Speaker, youth are facing real challenges right now at home, in school, and as they start their careers. Their mental health can suffer, and community organizations like the South Asian Canadian Health and Social Services in the members' riding are such a lifeline for support. We're creating a first-of-its-kind youth mental health fund to deliver more mental health supports and care choices for youth and communities across this country. We know they need it. We will be there for them. We're investing in Kids Help Phone and the Mental Health Black Canadians Fund because we know we need to meet people where they are. Mental health is health.
The honourable member from St. Albert, Edmonton.
Speaker, at committee, the Minister of Employment claimed that he had been cleared by the Ethics Commissioner to receive payments from Navis Group, a firm owned by his business partner that was lobbying his own department, except that that isn't true. The Office of the Ethics Commissioner has indicated that they were unaware of the minister's connection to Navis Group. So why did the minister claim that he was cleared when clearly he had not been cleared? Why did the minister mislead committee?
The Honourable Government House Leader.
Mr. Speaker, the Minister has answered these questions many times, and the Minister, of course, complies with all of the very stringent requirements of the Conflicts and Ethics Commissioner. What that member needs to answer is how will he approach this new a la carte rights campaign by the Leader of the Opposition. Which of the rights in the Charter of Rights, 42 years old, Mr. Speaker, is this member intending to take away? We know the Conservatives have always hated the Charter of Rights. Mr. Speaker, which rights will they be taking away?
Excellent.
The honourable member from St. Albert, Edmonton.
Mr. Speaker, the minister actively concealed his connection to Navis Group, hiding behind a numbered company. As a result, the Ethics Commissioner could not have known that the minister's business partner was lobbying his own department. If there are no ethical issues with the minister's connection to Navis Group, as the minister claims, then why did he hide it from the Ethics Commissioner?
The Honourable Government House Leader.
Mr. Speaker, the Conservatives are quite understandably taking this very red herring to try and distract from a very bad couple of weeks. What they have done is refused.
I'm going to ask the honourable members, please, to allow the honourable minister to finish his question. He's about 24 seconds left on the clock.
The Conservatives are quite understandably trying to distract from the fact that they refused to tell white supremacists that their support is unwelcome in the Conservative Party. They're trying to distract from the fact, Mr. Speaker, that they have always hated the Charter of Rights. They have always hated a woman's right to choose. They have always hated the right to free expression in this country. They need to stand up and explain themselves.
The honourable member from Sherwood Park, Fort Saskatchewan.
Mr. Speaker, behold, the ghost of Paul Martin is back. When a government is drowning, they will grasp onto anything, but they continue to sink nonetheless. Yeah. Now, Mr. Speaker, 6 years ago, the House and the government voted to list the IRGC as a terrorist organization and therefore prevent them from fundraising, recruiting, or operating in Canada. 6 years later, this terrorist group continues to operate here with impunity. Tomorrow, the House will vote again. Will this NDP Liberal government finally do what they failed to do 6 years ago and vote to shut down IRGC operations in Canada?
The Honourable Minister for Public Safety.
Mr. Speaker, as my colleague knows very well, decisions to list certain entities on the terrorist listing under Canada's Criminal Code are made based on the advice of security and intelligence services. We do acknowledge, and I think all Canadians understand, that the Iranian regime is one of the worst state sponsors of terrorism. We have taken a number of measures to deal with leaders in the Iranian regime, and we're always looking, Mr. Speaker, at what further steps we can take to protect Canadians.
The honourable member from Scarborough Agincourt.
Speaker, we have launched and improved immigration pathways for Hong Kongers to make it easier for them to stay and work in Canada. However, applicants are at risk of falling out of status as they await a decision on their PR application. Canada has always stood shoulder to shoulder with the people of Hong Kong. What is our government doing to help them get out of precarious situations?
The Honourable Minister for Immigration, Refugees and Citizenship.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I want to thank the member for Scarborough Agincourt for a tireless advocacy on this matter. Hong Kongers that are here are safe. and we have no intention, absolutely no intention, of sending them back. I'm pleased to announce today that we'll be announcing as of May 22nd that Hong Kongers that are here that have valid status will be able to apply for a 3-year open work permit while they wait for their permanent residency. This is an important measure. We will continue to stand with the people of Hong Kong.
Bravo.
The honourable member from Nanaimo, Ladysmith.
Mr. Speaker, despite Liberal promises to get open net fish farms full of Atlantic salmon out of West Coast waters, the minister sits idly by. To make matters worse, consecutive Liberal and Conservative governments have been muzzling scientists whose findings show the extent of the damages. It's not surprising to learn that the Public Sector Integrity Commissioner is now investigating more gross allegations. Will the Liberals cooperate, publish scientists' findings, and finally put coastal communities ahead of corporate profits?
The
Honourable Minister of Fisheries and Oceans.
To developing a responsible transition plan for open net aquaculture. We continue to work on a transition plan that protects Pacific salmon while providing support to workers and their communities and advancing reconciliation. Fisheries and Ocean Canada, along with my office, continue to have constructive conversation with stakeholders and regarding next steps. Thank you.
The honourable member from Churchill, Kiwatanuk-Aski.
Mr. Speaker, this government is always ready to take a dive for big cities, but refuses to pass the ball to Indigenous and Northern youth, giving $104 million for 6 games of the FIFA World Cup in Toronto, but not making room for soccer in Indigenous and Northern communities is offside. In regions like ours, soccer is more than a game. It's a life-saving pass for kids. Canada has a responsibility to include all our youth in the lead-up to the 2026 World Cup, or we'll get a red card. So, Mr. Speaker, when will this government stop dribbling the ball in circles and find a way to include Indigenous and Northern youth as we all host soccer on the world stage?
The Honourable Minister.
Mr. Speaker, our government announced last week an investment of $220 million to host the FIFA World Cup games in Vancouver and Toronto. This will generate economic impact, Mr. Speaker, of $2 billion for our country. That's a return on that investment, Mr. Speaker.
Well done.
And so brings to the end of question period today, and I know all members will be
So we're bringing it back in to put it back out. We've got more videos. Check these ones out. They're pretty friggin' fun. I think I'm trying to find like entertaining things to show you.
Justin Trudeau will do just about anything to silence Canadians who disagree with him. Today, he sunk to another low, this time using his partisan hack, Liberal Speaker Greg Fergus, to silence the leader of the opposition, the leader of the Conservative Party, Pierre Poilievre. Today in the House of Commons, Poilievre said what most Canadians know to be true about Justin Trudeau, and that is that Justin Trudeau is a wacko who has implemented a series of wacko policies that are destroying our country. Poilievre said this in the context of calling on Trudeau to reverse his wacko drug policies, specifically his policy of decriminalization of hard drugs in British Columbia. Hard drugs like meth, crack, and fentanyl that have caused chaos and death throughout British Columbia communities. Drug addicts are overdosing in hospitals, community centers, and in parks. Last year, a record 2,500 British Columbians lost their lives due to a drug overdose. It's so bad that even the radical and pro-drug NDP government are calling on Trudeau to reverse his wacko hard drug decriminalization policy. So, in the normal course, Justin Trudeau would have to stand up in the House and answer for his disastrous policies. But to avoid doing so, he no doubt ordered his hack speaker, Greg Fergus, to do something new, to silence the leader of the opposition by actually kicking Poilievre out of the House chamber. This is outrageous, and it is part of a pattern of Trudeau silencing Canadians and those who are prepared to stand up to him. This is the same Justin Trudeau that froze the bank accounts of law-abiding Canadians, the same Prime Minister, the same Justin Trudeau who illegally invoked the Emergencies Act to crush peaceful protesters, the same Justin Trudeau who has passed online censorship laws, and now today Justin Trudeau used the Speaker to silence the Leader of the Opposition by literally throwing him out of the chamber that he was duly elected to speak on behalf of Canadians in. It demonstrates once again that Justin Trudeau is an ever-present threat to our democracy, and his wacko policies are killing Canadians as we speak.
Adam Sills here for Rebel News. Despite being the most disliked mayor in the history of Calgary, Mayor Jyoti Gondek and her gaggle of woke councillors seemed dead set on voting for the most unreasonable policies they can think of, showing a clear lack of introspection. You may be asking yourself, how much worse can City Council get than banning fireworks for suggesting they are colonialist and racist, botching an arena deal only to sign a more expensive one, rezoning the city despite clear backlash from folks suggesting that that is not what is best for the citizens of Calgary, and a litany of woke, radical, aggressive agendas that simply will not stop. How much worse can it get than that? Well, you might be surprised. You'll be shocked to learn that City Council voted 9-6 here in the city of Calgary in favor of advancing a policy that would see non-citizens vote in this city. Now, the Municipal Affairs Minister for the province, Rick McIver, has already said that this is nonsense and it simply will not happen. But in order to garner some more perspective on this, I sat down with one of the non-wacko councillors from City Council, Dan McLean of Ward 13, to get his opinion. The idea of non-citizens voting is not reasonable, is it?
No, not at all. So it's non-citizens is a broad term, but it's permanent residents is kind of what Councillor Walcott and others were voting for. And again, it was to put it to the Alberta municipalities to then lobby to get it done. So that vote yesterday didn't automatically make it happen. Right. The province says no way is going to happen, and I agree with them. Yeah. No, it's I love permanent residents. They add a lot to our society, but citizens vote only.
Right. Yeah. So and on that note, why is it that 9 people in City Council, despite the fact that Rick McIver, who's in charge of municipal affairs, said this isn't happening, saw fit to move forward with this as a virtue signaling? What's the basis for the vote going this way when it's not going to happen anyways?
Yeah, of course. There's always a lot of that woke virtue signaling. And I don't know why, but there's a certain component of council that loves wasting time, wasting money too. But this is an utter waste of time and resources. So I don't understand it. So here we are.
You know, my next question for you, I suppose we know that on a federal level, Justin Trudeau is sort of bringing in mass immigration and there's nothing wrong with immigration, but on a level that we can't even provide housing for. And many suggest that he's doing that in order to sort of secure votes that he may not otherwise have. Do you suspect that for some councillors, their hope is by allowing people to vote, they may be able to garner some votes? Do you think that's part of the consideration here?
Well, lots to take in there, because there's the motivations you'll see is south of the border as well. There's been talk about 16-year-olds voting as well from some of the same councillors. So do they think that they would probably vote more towards the left? You know, I think that's probably their thinking. But going to the mass immigration, like underneath Stephen Harper, Minister Harper, it was 350,000 people coming in per year. We need immigration, a robust immigration system, but you nailed it there with 1 million people coming in for a year. We're in a housing shortage because we've got a lot of people competing for the same houses. That nails it right there. Blanket up zoning is the solution, I don't think.
Well, let's get into that really quickly, and then we'll get back to this conversation, though. What has the feedback been like? I know originally there were sort of split panels, so you're getting both sides. But now that citizens are having their say, what's the majority opinion on that rezoning conversation?
Just like all the previous polling, I mean, 2/3, 3/4 of people are against this. We're seeing this now in the panels. At the very beginning, the first few days, it was an even mix, which is what we try to do. The last several days have been all people coming. They ran out of, I guess, the supporters. Yeah. To be honest, we see the same people all the time. Some of these groups that are, I forget the exact term for it, but it's just these special interest groups.
Yeah.
And you'll see, if you saw a couple councillors go to the university, to the students' union, and go on radio shows and recruiting people out of the unions. We've seen high school kids come and speak. So they go out and recruit real hard. The people on the no side, I mean, don't do that at all. This is grassroots people coming out that say, I don't want this. And yes, the majority are against it.
Now, for folks out there who maybe don't know, obviously the sort of federal and provincial mandates are sort of constitutionally defined, but cities very much operate underneath the sort of jurisdiction of the province. Do you have any thoughts on that for folks who maybe are thinking, well, how come the province is butting in on some of these matters?
Well, that's the way it's always been.
Yeah.
I mean, the province has jurisdiction. It's called the Municipal Government Act. They create cities. They do the funding. It's always been that way. The province has always had the power to come in and wipe out a whole council if they wanted to. They saw that in Chestermere. There's all sorts of sketchy stuff going on. Yeah. So now this isn't changing anything. People are worried about the province maybe expanding their powers. They're just letting people know, maybe putting people on notice. The cities have always been beholden to the province. They say that we are the children. They're like the parents. And I think once I said to the press, sometimes the kids need a spanking.
That sounds just about right. Now, one other thing on that sort of notion of the interaction between provincial and municipal governments, the provincial government apparently, we're just hearing, backing down on the cutting of funding for sort of affordable transit passes. What's the latest on that? Yeah,
low-income transit pass. That came up yesterday. And it was a $5-6 million. The province says that they were going to stop. It was a pilot program.
Right.
I actually had a conversation this morning with the minister saying they were going to backtrack on that. Right. I didn't think it was right. The optics were terrible. I mean, the city's running massive surpluses. We have a spending problem. The province also has, they're spending too. They have lots of, and they have a surplus. But for $5 million, I mean, low-income transit pass is.
Oh, hello. Do you have a warrant to be here?
Maybe there's a little grass growing right along here. Some happy little things.
I love you, you love me. We all own our own bodies, so marry who you want and do whatever drugs you choose. And when it's time, you can die with dignity by determining your own end-of-life plan.
Hi, Maria!
Hi, Officer Winkles!
How you doing today?
I don't have to answer that question.
That is correct!
I'm recording you!
Am I being detained?
Nope!
Which I can legally do because I'm in a public place!
Come back if you have a warrant!
Alrighty!
Know your rights!
Yay!
Okay, Gumshoes, Carmen Sandiego is in a country where socialism failed. That narrows it down to Venezuela, Cuba, the former Soviet Union, Moldova, Laos, Vietnam, Albania, Angola. So we did some digging into your past.
Oh, this suspense is killing me! But we still haven't solved the case, Holmes. Why is marijuana a Schedule I drug?
Elementary, my dear Watson. Nixon and racism.
What?
You okay?
I don't know.
Hey, man, it's alright. It's alright. We've got qualified immunity. Qualified immunity. It's not for you, it's just for me. I shot your dog.
I shot your wife.
I get to go on with my life.
My favorite part is where the character says, I do not want green eggs and ham. And then Sam I Am says, that's fine. You don't have to eat them. That's your right. The end. It's a short book.
Here we see one of the last taxicab monopolies struggling for life. Competitors have entered their ecosystem.
Do you know what eminent domain abuse is? It's when the government decides the neighborhood of make-believe is better used by a Taiwanese LCD manufacturer.
Today we have a real senator. Hello, Senator.
How are you doing?
What is your favorite color?
I would have to say blue.
Me too. Tell me, why did you sell all your stock right before the crash?
I mean, it's literally just the tragedy of the commons, but they made it cute.
And that sound means we're in international waters. I'm gonna marry a robot and sell my kidney on eBay.
My dearest Rowena, today the district attorney filed criminal charges against a two-door sedan.
Carmen Sandiego is hiding in a country that contains an American military base. Is she in Australia, Bahrain, Belgium, Brazil, Bulgaria, the British Indian Ocean Territory, Cuba, Germany, Djibouti?
Menace.
Circle, square, rectangle, war factory.
All right, Jack, where is your gay wedding cake?
I refuse to bake a gay wedding cake, and you can't force me to. It's my right.
That is your right, but it is my right to kick you off of this show. Please leave.
Yep.
You homophobic, bearded meat goblin.
I just want enough to warm it up some. I don't want to set it on fire. It's very easy to set it on fire.
Well, today on This Old House, we're at the city zoning office because they think our new porch is 2 inches too close to the sidewalk, which is f***ing bullshit because their sidewalk is too far away from the street, which they'd know about if they'd read any of the emails I'd sent them over the past 18 months. So join us as we waste our whole f***ing day on this shit.
The premiere of Thomas the High-Speed Rail has been delayed again. And at the 10 Bitcoin level, you receive a handsome tote bag.
Quack! Good one! Quiet! Very good! Queen! What else starts with the letter Q?
Space lasers.
Oh!
John Podesta and Hillary Clinton had an email exchange about hot dogs.
Where do we get these puppets?
It's a beautiful day in the neighborhood, and you have a right to defend your house with firearms. With firearms.
The honourable member for St. Albert, Edmonton.
Speaker.